And action. So you've already been introduced to Sabrina, but as Allison mentioned, she's the Associate Director of Research and Teaching Scholarship, and she also chairs the STAR Committee, which meets regularly to strategize and facilitate research and teaching scholarship capacity in the school. And I also submit on that committee, so if you have larger research concerns or questions, that's also another kind of group that you can direct some of those questions to. And then I am the Research Grants Facilitator and Knowledge Translation Manager for the Office of Nursing Research and Teaching Scholarship. So when you see the acronym ONRTS, and wonder what that is and who that is, which is often a question that students have. It is me. Whether you're using the ONRTS email address or mine, it all comes to me. So we're one and the same. And then of course I report to Sabrina in the AD research role. So I thought I'd start high level today, just talking about the research kind of resources within the university, partly because my office liaises with so many of those, so many sections of that VPRI research portfolio. So the VP of Research and Innovation is huge. But definitely the Office of Research Services, any kind of grant application that you want to submit needs to be submitted in advance to ORS. Regardless of what the funder requires, UBC requires that, so I can help support that. I know some of you have already had the opportunity to engage with Spark. They're sort of like my counterpart in Central, but they only support tri-agency competitions. And what's nice about them is they are full-time, like uber experts on those specific competitions. And so I think I see myself as a bit of the glorious generalist in the research grants world. And they are truly specialists, and they spend all their time developing amazing resources for different competitions. So if you haven't looked at their website, do. And yeah, happy to talk about kind of how our supports kind of intersect, but I'll get to that a little bit later. The Institutional Programs Office is very specific around Canadian Foundation of CFI, Canadian Foundation of Innovation. They also support CFREFs and CERCs and like all these really massive funding mechanisms that have very limited quotas within the university, so that's why there's a separate office that kind of manages those big grants. So again, happy to talk more about that if there's questions, but those often tend to be very limited kind of invitations to invite to some of those competitions. UILO office, I mean, I joke that they're the black box. They support contracts, and we do use it for government contracts particularly. They are not as time sensitive as ORS because there isn't usually the deadlines that grant applications have. So, you know, they help us. They've got a legal team on staff, which is really important, obviously, for the contracts. But again, I try to help get things through UILO faster. I'm not always sure how effective it is, but definitely happy to discuss when things go to UILO versus ORS. That's a bit shifting sands. They like to fight about who has to do what. So again, happy to support kind of figuring out some of those, navigating those administrative structures as well. The Indigenous Research Support Initiative is a little bit of a newer group at UBC, and my sense is that really they're a gateway for Indigenous groups that want to partner with UBC faculty. So it's almost like the support is for the community, not so much support for the faculty. So they will sometimes reach out to faculty that seem like they are working in areas that are of interest to potential groups that are reaching out to UBC, but it was kind of developed in response to this concern that trying to access UBC is just overwhelming, and this would be a one-stop shop where community groups could connect to UBC. I'm going to skip over some of these grayed out pieces because they're units that I deal with less. Obviously we have like Manon Ranger, deals with animal care stuff. Ellen does all the research finance stuff in the school. But then Office of Research Ethics, primarily BREB for us. Sabrina and I both are connected with that, so I'm happy to help support questions around BREB, although again they have staff in-house as well that are really experts in their systems, so often we'll reach out to them. But Sabrina provides all the departmental review and approval that are required for any ethics application that are coming from nursing faculty and going forward for ethics review. And as you probably already know, many of our funding applications require ethics approval before we can have the funding activated. So it can be a bit of a rate limiting step, and there's definitely kind of strategies around timing for some of those ethics review processes. I just want to highlight the last two that are kind of bolded here. The Knowledge Exchange Unit, which is again a newer unit in the university, and the director of that unit actually was an ex-postdoc of John Olaf's, so we have really strong nursing history with that unit. Jen Crichton is the director, and we now actually have they have 4 inaugural Knowledge Exchange scholars that were appointed, and Sandra Locke is one of those inaugural KX scholars. So, not surprisingly, School of Nursing is really a leader in kind of thinking about knowledge exchange. And then the Office of Research Prizes and Awards, ORPA, it's like the weirdest acronym out there, I think, is also a relatively new group, but they're centralized and their mandate is to support faculty award nominations. Again, they have a very limited list of awards that they support. They tend to be really big ones like the Order of Canada, some of the big tri-agency awards, but they're really helpful. And if they, they have different they have some flexibility. If they have time and space, they're happy to help with other things. So sometimes we draw on them just to see if they've seen nominations for different competitions, but I've had an opportunity to work with both the social sciences and the health research folks in that office, and yeah, they're a great resource, and they have a library of nominations that they keep as well, which is nice because we don't always have necessarily nominations from the School of Nursing that have gone for some of these large awards, so it's nice to be able to tap into that. So when you get the slide deck, the link actually will send you to the full sheet that describes all those units, but I just wanted to do a brief overview. So this also is VPRI orientation program. The good news and bad news. Bad news, they did a huge program in 2023, but decided not to do any of them in 2024. The good news is that they did record all the sessions. So that, again, there's the link for all those recorded sessions. My sense is that they'll probably do another round of them in a year or two, but for whatever reason, nothing in 2024, but definitely feel free to check out the link for that. And then, the slide deck is going to be a little bit of my collection of graphics of research processes at UBC, but this one I thought it was nice because it really shows the research grant cycle. And where you can go to look up some of the funding opportunities, and you can see I've added my little ONRTS button in some of those boxes. But this website is UBC's kind of central aggregate place for all the funding opportunities that they know about. They try to be as comprehensive as they can, and you can definitely subscribe to their monthly newsletter, which I recommend. But of course, I find in terms of specific nursing calls, they tend not to necessarily have those, so you'll still want to stay well connected with your own kind of networks that might have calls more particular to your research program. Of course, with proposal development, we've talked about Spark a little bit already. Faculty grant facilitators, there is a team at the Dean's Office within the Faculty of Applied Science. Unfortunately, they're much more experienced with NSERC than any of the other kind of awards that we tend to apply to, but they can support in some ways, so definitely happy to connect people to them if there's kind of opportunities. And one place we've really seen them being incredibly supportive is with Canada Research Chairs. They have a lot of expertise with that. So, proposal submission. Again, we talked about how everything that you submit has to go through ORS. And there's a couple reasons for that. Obviously, the university wants to keep metrics on the number of proposals that are going out, as well as the money coming in. And then, of course, if you're successful and money shows up that they have no idea what it is, we don't want them to lose your money. So basically, that's part of the reason why we need to submit those RPIFs always before a grant submission, even if the funder doesn't need institutional signatures. The step 4 is funny, and I gave myself a different color for this button, in part because in some ways this is automated. Like for tri-agencies, they directly liaise with ORS with your funding and with copies of your notice of decision and your notice of award. But for smaller funding agencies or more obscure competitions, often their only point of contact is the PI. So ORS doesn't get any notice that you've been funded. I don't get any notice that you've been funded. So this is sort of a growing piece of my portfolio, is helping faculty, still in this kind of pre-award stage, but helping faculty actually get that kind of funding set up. And sometimes there's some very unusual paperwork that happens with that. Increasingly, we're seeing funding agencies that do matching funds, and that Ellen can attest are administrative nightmares. Wonderful for students that often get funded through those mechanisms, but really messy for the PI and for me and for Ellen. But we do try to ease the process as much as we can. So again, if you've been funded but you don't know what the next step is, definitely reach out to me, and I can help you with navigating those kind of processes. Step 5, of course, is all the sort of compliance issues that you need to launch your research, and that's another piece of what the RPIF does. It indicates to the UBC kind of account setup teams whether there's ethics requirements on your application and what needs to be in place before the funding's released. So again, a really important reason why you need to complete those RPIFs accurately, because it will literally halt your funding until you've met those kind of compliance requirements. And then I won't talk about the finance management and reporting because that's Ellen's area. But then this last piece around knowledge mobilization after the fact. We do have lots of resources in the university around open access publications. Some of you will know that we have an open access award for graduate students. And I wouldn't say it's a huge part of my portfolio, but I do field queries from faculty from time to time about journals that they're considering submitting to, or just issues in terms of some of the licensing or open access kind of concerns that they might have. And we also work regularly with our librarian as well, who's great.
Can I make a comment about the open access publications? I do find a lot of people, by the time they're ready to publish the grant that they originally got the funding from, would expire. So you may want to make note of that, and if you need to ask for an extension from the funding agency, do it earlier rather than later.
Yeah, that's an excellent point on research finance management. So yet another graphic about the administrative kind of processes for grants at UBC, but again, just to highlight kind of where the ONRTS kind of supports, and then obviously there's that middle section that Ellen's team supports around the financial management of your grants and any kind of HR related to your grants. And this one, when I saw this figure a couple of years ago from Ellen, and I was like, finally, this explains so much. And basically, there's two systems. So UBC is incredibly siloed, and of course, our administrative team also ends up having to reflect some of that siloed organization, and so you can really see that in my portfolio I really support pre-awards, and that aligns with the RISE system, which is what ORS uses for kind of inputting all of the new grant submissions that go out. And that's when they get assigned a FAST number. And so that's the ID number that UBC uses to recognize your grant application until you actually get your funding set up in Workday, at which point it gets a new number called the work tag. So basically all of the kind of communications that we do with ORS and anywhere else at UBC early on before your funding actually gets activated, that FAST number is so key. It increases the speed of response from ORS or UILO, and just helps them support you to kind of get what you need to be done. And then, like I said, the work tag, if you're trying to spend money, that's when you need that number. So you'll know that your account funding has been activated when you get an email with what's called an RPB, a research project budget, which is basically a PDF, and it has all those identifying numbers on it. It should have the FAST number, it'll have the work tag number, it'll show you the years when the money is going to drop. It'll also usually have the ID number from the funder, because of course they have a different number as well. So that's kind of a go-to place to see where all that information is. And you'll get updates as the account information changes. And I just added this one just to kind of try to clarify the difference between ORS and UILO. They're definitely both pre-award, although we do often go to UILO kind of after the fact if there's funding agencies that require a contract before they release the funding. But predominantly we use ORS, and increasingly because UILO is really trying to only, I think they're trying to specialize just in the private sector kind of contracts. So yeah, more and more contracts are being handled by ORS as well. And so you'll see any kind of sub-grant, usually if it's a regular research grant, goes through ORS. Yeah, so this is more as a resource, but even I don't always know which place is going to take it, and like I said, because they've been changing who does what in the last year or two, I've even had them like fight over it. No, you do it. No, you do it. So always keeps it.
So I actually think if you're doing a sub-grant, it has to go through UILO.
No.
That's what I was told.
That's wrong.
Adriana is at UILO.
If it's a tri-agency sub-grant, it goes through ORS.
So let's be really clear about
Yeah.
this. If it's tri-agency, meaning SHRC, ANSWER, or CIHR, it goes through ORS. If it's a different agency, such as Health Canada, Public Health Agency of Canada, Heart and Stroke Foundation, that is a sub-grant, and you're getting a sub-grant, that sub-grant will go through UILO.
Yeah.
So we have to be really, it is really kind of tricky around what's going to UILO and what's going to ORS. And that, in fact, more and more of my stuff, because I have to put in place data transfer agreements, memorandums of agreement, et cetera, et cetera. My stuff is all under contracts. I have a contract with BCH. It's going through UILO. It does not go through ORS.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. That I would say that's an exception to what I've been seeing, because stuff I used to send to UILO all goes through ORS now. So like I said, they've been doing a reshuffle and they have not communicated the changes that they've made. So it's been very much a learn by trial and error, which obviously doesn't make it easy for the PIs or for people like me trying to support PIs. But that's really helpful. Like you said, I mean, Health Canada always has agreements, so it never comes as a kind of traditional grant. So that would make total sense that would have to be renegotiated as a contract. I mean, rule of thumb is if you should have lawyers looking at it, it should go through UILO, but any of the sub-grants that are coming off of tri-agency stuff tends to go through ORS now.
Just to clarify, when we say sub-grants, that would be like a colleague at another institution maybe holds tri-agency funds and they want to allocate some to like a co-PI kind of thing?
Yeah, so it makes a difference which direction it's going. So if you're the MPA here and you want to hive off a bit of funding to send to your colleague who's doing another arm of the study somewhere else, There's a special form that you fill. It's surprisingly painless, and we just submit it to ORS, and then they actually liaise with the other institutions, kind of administrative folks, and help facilitate that transfer. If it's coming the other direction, the expectation is their kind of equivalent of ORS should be reaching out to our ORS. What usually happens, unfortunately, is often that just gets sent to the PI and said, like, you take care of it, right? So I'm always happy to help, like, send it to the right person in ORS and just help that. But the expectation, if it's coming from somewhere else, they need to initiate it, because we can't say, give us the money. They can just say, we're ready to send you the money. The other issue sometimes is different institutions have different requirements. So some institutions want very complicated agreements, which may or may not go through UILO or ORS. Other ones keep it pretty simple, because especially if they're big institutions, they're like, oh, UBC, oh, U of T, like we know what we're doing, kind of thing. So
Thanks.
I would say knowing who the right people are is key, and this is where I found you particularly helpful, Merrilee, because you know the people in all of these places, and sometimes they change.
Yeah.
Like, I think there was one case we had where someone moved from one to the other.
yeah.
And because I'm identifying the people that I'm communicating with.
Yeah.
And it's true, these forms are painless, but the pain comes with the communication between different institutions that is invisible to me, but can sometimes take a very long time. And it's usually because, oh, well, actually, someone retired in Thunder Bay and it's taking a long time there, but you would never know. So just, apparently it's helpful to just make a little bit more transparent what some of those processes are and to facilitate connecting with the right people in the right places.
Yeah, and we've seen huge turnover in some of those offices in the last couple of years. Everything from, parental leaves to people moving to other, like we've had people move from ORS to UILO to St. Paul's. So we still end up dealing with them, but in different kind of roles and capacities. I try to keep tabs on them all, and I have worked with many of them for many years, so I think that's been helpful too, because they trust me. So I get emails sometimes, they're like, hey, is it okay, can we approve this? And I can say yes. So that's been really helpful to develop those long-term relationships with some of those people in those offices. But yeah, it's been wild. We've had now retirees who've come out of retirement to backfill positions. Just
We
yeah.
don't mind those ones.
Yeah, we were excited about them. Yeah.
They know what to do.
Yeah.
But I
Welcome
think
back.
Between Merrilee and I, we have a lot of experience. I have a lot more experience now. I'm administering a $20 million grant, and I have like 25 sub-grants that are going out to different institutions and reporting and accountabilities, and now I'm doing contracts with consultants, because sometimes you want to have a consultant just do one piece of work. So there's a lot of kind of intricacies about how you need to like make it right with ORS or UILO, in particular on the contract side. And you know, there's UILO will look at some things, and then other things are like, okay, this is okay to do within our system, and Ellen probably knows a lot about the finance stuff, but so yeah, I mean, I think there's a huge depth of experience, and it's not just knowing the people, it's also being able to ask the right questions, right, to the right people, and between the two of us and some of the other people that are around, we can figure it out. But always just please ask questions, because that will help you be less frustrated.
Yeah, and to be honest, the agreements, they take a long time if you're dealing with other institutions, because often UBC will want to make their edits to the agreements, the other institution will want to make edits to the agreements, then everybody has to send it back and forth to get signatures. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about kind of the timelines for some of these projects. If you're planning to send funding to other places, that can eat up months sometimes.
I have templates for many universities across the country now, so I can help you with that. Because they like the templated languages.
Yeah.
So, you know, if it's going to U of T, which is one that we deal with all the time, or, you know, whatever university, like, there's different templates that many of us will have that we can help. But in fact, I just use the UILO people, and sometimes I'll just give them here's a template that we've used, are you okay with this? Because it's all like UBC language stuff, and then they'll do minor changes, but that actually helps to speed up the process.
Yeah, that's a great point. And UBC used to post those templates and they've removed them. So I still have copies of some of those templates. I don't know why they won't share our templates now. But it's a great place to start because then they're already happy with the language. Yeah.
I was just curious, because I'm moving stuff from St. Paul's to here, I have like previous existing contracts with consultants and like statisticians and things. Do those all also now need to be moved over? Okay, yay. And then my other question is, I have part of a grant to move, to use updated PC data, and they have contracts that you have to initiate to access their data.
Yeah.
That's a subcontract of an award that I have here, and is that how I should look at it in order to pay those fees?
Yeah, the pop data, I mean, I feel like they have a form of their own that I've seen.
They do.
Yeah.
There's like, it has to come through the HPI funds, which are here,
Yeah.
and so there's also like data sharing agreements that we
Yeah.
have to sign and all that kind of stuff, because it's linked to data.
Let's talk more.
I can help you with that.
Okay.
I've done a lot of stuff on the linked data side
Okay.
and pop data. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a step that I haven't had to do before. I've just had access to
Yeah.
ministry data like
Right.
independently through someone else and not having had to initiate it. on my
Right.
own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a lot of experience with pop data. And then I was going to ask you, are you an adjunct at St.
No, I'm an
Paul's?
assistant.
Do you have an adjunct appointment though at St. Paul's as
I
well?
actually have a clinical appointment. Like I'm
Yeah.
still attached to them.
So you may not have to move all your contracts, just
Okay.
let them run out, but let's
Okay.
figure
I'll
that
find
out a
out.
little
Okay,
bit more.
thank
So I
you.
don't, because I think it's probably too much to kind of move it over. It depends on when the contracts are ending, and
Yeah.
if you need to put a new one in place. Anything that's new, I would say, start it here.
Yeah.
But if there's things that are kind of ending, like projects that are ending where you have these contracts out and you already have an appointment there, I don't think you probably need to move it, but
Okay.
we'll check it out.
Okay.
Merrilee will help us. with
Well,
that.
again, this is where the divide between Ellen and I comes into play too. If the funding's already active, I have no access to any of the finance systems. So if you're wondering where your money's going, and I don't see that. All I see is that front-end pre-award piece that goes through ORS. So in terms of how your accounts are running,
It's in limbo right now. I don't know where the money is. It's just doesn't exist in either spot right now. So I'm waiting for it to arrive so I can figure out what to do.
Yeah, once you get your RPB, then you know it's arrived.
Yeah.
And then it will eventually, pretty much the next day or so, homework day,
Okay.
money is there. The other thing too is they're trying to move more and more work in terms of transferring funds to other institutions back to the department. So if the funds are here in nursing, then I also need a copy of that agreement to make that transfer to the other institution. So
Okay.
something to know.
Okay. Yeah.
Because otherwise Central won't approve it.
I see. Okay. Yeah. I have a meeting with Ellen to discuss all this. We can figure it out.
And you probably have someone on the other side too, right? In St. Paul's that you still deal with when the finance stuff.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. Through chaos.
Yeah.
Because they do my
yeah, oh yeah,
data-
chaos will be fine.
Yeah, they do my
It'll be
data
fine.
management like stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
if you knew you wanted to come here, but the chaos stuff on the sort of the post-award side, you should be able to see where your money is.
Okay.
Yeah.
and an added complication is with ORS approvals. There's actually ORS offices or individuals in a lot of the different clinical sites. So depending where your research is being conducted, even though the funding may be held here in the School of Nursing, we have to send it to a different ORS office. So St. Paul's has an office, Vancouver Coastal Health, BC Children's. So again, we try to simplify things for faculty, and I hear this isn't something that happens necessarily in other units, but we try to do it as a one-stop shop. So if you submit your RPIF and your application details to me, I'll coordinate getting the director's sign off on it and also submit it to the correct ORS office. So you just have to submit it once, not 3 times.
Can I ask, what's the timing of all, like, how long ahead of time do you need it?
Yes, yes. So this didn't show up very well,
Okay.
but there is a web page that does, I do try to list those internal deadlines. It's typically a week in advance of the funding agency.
Okay.
But I would encourage you just to reach out to me and say, hey, I'm planning this, let me know what the timelines are, and I'll just send you what it is. Then I know it's coming too, so I can anticipate it, and you know, if usually Elizabeth's very available for sign-offs, but if there isn't, I can make sure we have someone else in place. And yeah, if it's a more obscure or less popular competition, I might not have it posted. So yeah, just send me a note and then I can.
And I just sort of a lot more question about
Yeah.
that. Is that to say that do we need to adhere to a specific timeline for things like letters of recommendation or letters to accompany grant applications, or is that a longer period before?
Yeah, so this kind of 1 week timeline is just for the actual institutional approval, kind of the requirement that UBC has that any grant being submitted also gets copied to UBC. In terms of any letters from directors and deans and stuff like that, we actually just kind of issued a new policy on that in the spring because we're getting so many more competitions that have those requirements, right? And so basically the policy is PIs are responsible for drafting their own letters. They know the competition they're applying to. They know their own research program that they want to highlight. But if it needs a director or dean's signature, I'm happy to help facilitate that. But if it has any kind of promissory notes, you need to negotiate that directly with the director. So I don't know why I didn't include it here, but I'll add it to the package for Allison. There's a little graphic that I drew for it, but basically 3 weeks in advance for director's letters.
Okay.
I do have some templates on file, so if it's just a simple like proving that you work here, we can do those pretty quick and easy. If it's a more elaborate one where you need to have guaranteed protected time or just like a commendation from the director about how wonderful you are, then yeah, you'll definitely want more time for that and have time to kind of craft that for Elizabeth. And then, yeah, she's pretty quick about turning them around, but the expectation is that the PI does draft those. And I'm happy to look at drafts too, because I do look at a lot of the letters. So if you've written something, you're like, oh, is this going to work for this competition in particular? Yeah, happy to chat about that as well. I hesitated about putting the RPIF on here, but I know I hear lots of angst about RPIFs, and I know junior, senior, it's like a pain for everyone. The only thing I can say good about the RPIF is that there is talk about doing an online form instead, and I shudder to think what that will look like. So at least with the PDF, we can usually fix things. So I would say if you're sending me your RPIF, try to do it in a way that allows edits, because often I have to change things. But I just highlighted a couple of common errors. It's always the PI that's listed, never students or trainees. If it is student or trainee funding, they get to go down here. If it's like a sub-grant, that's the only time you use this kind of other thing. So you'd say what the primary source is and then who you're actually getting your money from, whether it's a colleague at some other university or something like that. I see lots of people who like to use this as a total for this line, but in fact this is only if you have internal funds, so don't total up your line there. This bottom section, faculty medicine, we don't even have to complete that. This one is where it impacts which ORS office we send it to. So if you're 100% UBC Vancouver, it'll go to our ORS office here. Soon as you add any of these other groups, it basically sends it to it means we have to send it to a different ORS office. So think strategically about your percentages.
Same question with the other, please specify if it's like a sub-grant.
Yeah.
Would you put the name of the person or their institution? Like the,
I do both, actually.
okay.
Just, I always figure more information is better in terms of helping the administrative people who see this paperwork kind of follow the money. So yeah, I usually put both. And sometimes even if I know of any ID numbers that kind of link to whatever that funding source is, I'll throw that on there too. Just anything that helps. Yeah.
This is sort of maybe a random question, but does this form need to also be filled out if you're getting private donor funds for research?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so in that case, you will not have submitted necessarily a formal application, like if someone
Yeah.
just contacts you and says, hey, we want to give you money.
Yeah.
So what we end up almost doing is making a pretend proposal to submit along with it. In part because of this section, if you say no, ORS gets really squirrely about what the money's for and how you're going to use it, and they want to know all these things. It's much better just to provide a sort of pseudo grant. And so what I usually call for a pseudo grant is, give the project a title, provide a little abstract, like a paragraph, and a basic budget. Just that gives a few budget line items that say how that money's going to be spent. So they just feel like they've got some paperwork on the system that says what's happening with it. And then that little bundle we can submit to ORS, but in that case we'll probably want a letter of award because they won't have any knowledge of what this is or where it's coming from. And often those kind of private donors will have their own kind of process about how they want to do funding transfer stuff. We do have kind of a UBC banking info sheet that we can send to funders, so we can say like, here, this is how you send us money, and then that's where it's nice to get the RPIF done first, so then we can say, and please include the FAS number, so that UBC will know what the money is when it gets here. So happy to talk more about that. Ellen also deals with this kind of stuff a lot too, so she also is familiar with some of those questions.
Yeah, and then ORS, they have a lot of new staff, so they're really keen on getting the budget.
Yes.
They won't open your grant until you do so.
Yeah. So more seasoned staff had a little bit more flexibility because they understood kind of the systems, but the fresh staff are very adherent to the rules. Yes. So
I just want to point out one thing. Sabrina just mouthed to me how important it is to understand, in many respects, UBC has one bank account. And to really understand what that means, why it helped me be more forgiving for all these processes. They are for a reason. Like when you say you don't want them to lose your money, it's very easy to do.
yeah, and when you see that sort of UBC banking information, like it is just a single account, everything gets sent to this one place, right? So that's why you want that information tagged along with it to say what that money is and that it should be coming to you.
So I've actually had the experience where we've lost money in the system. So it's hit the system. And like if you ever deal with Health Canada, they will always do like a test run first, and they'll be like, did you receive $1? And it's like, yes. And then we have to do this back and forth between UILO or whoever it is. It's other people at UBC that are looking at the bank account to see, did you get it? And then once you say that, then they send the money, and then it hits your account. And that's why there's multiple different accounts for every single grant that you get. So if you have one project and you're getting grant money or monies from different places, it goes into different accounts. So like if you had a project and you have a donor and then you have CIHR money and something else, you'll have 3 different accounts, right?
Yeah, because UBC never mixes money
Yeah.
for auditing reasons, right? So it makes it difficult on the project management side, but on the auditing side, it's incredibly important, so money's never mixed.
If you think you've lost money, come talk to me. The central finance does provide a update on unclaimed money.
Unclaimed monies.
Unclaimed monies, and usually it's about 4 or 5 of all the different accounts.
You should have like a special event, offer food, people can just go, I'm missing money.
They just send it back.
Sorry?
Do they leave it there for a year?
No, they just
and
leave
then-
it there, and then just update that list, and then someone will eventually claim it. Some of them are sitting there at least 4 or 5 years.
Maybe that's where your missing money is.
Yeah, so
Well, I'm
you,
currently missing a check. Apparently there was a check that was issued out of BCH and it was sent here, but, you know, they sent it in the
When
mail.
did it?
so if those lost checks, you have to come look for us too.
Yeah, look
Because
for,
Clara would look for it at the hospital mail.
yeah,
Oh, okay,
I
yeah.
check that once a week, but if it's not specifically addressed to you,
Right,
I would have given it to Ellen, and she might have it not knowing who it's
right,
for.
yeah, yeah.
Or it gets lost in the
Or it
abyss
gets lost
because-
down there, and then I can go down there and
Somewhere,
specifically look for it in all of the other mailboxes and ask.
They,
So,
yeah, they mix
there-
our mail with OT a lot.
Yeah. So there are places, if it's, do you know how long ago it was?
It'll go to Joyce at Chester.
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
But it's just another example
Yeah,
where the.
it is complicated,
That it can get lost.
yeah.
So, yeah.
But yeah.
That's
it's a
why
chat.
what Merrilee says to you is very important.
Yeah, and so I mean, I always do review the RPIF, but of course you know your project best. And one other piece that I just wanted to highlight was the ethics requirements, because this will have implications. It has to match what your grant application says. So if your grant application says there's ethics requirements, but your RPIF doesn't, they won't sign off on the grant. So make sure they match. But then also know anything that has ethics requirements means the funding won't get released until those requirements have been met. And the exception, of course, I should have added the form, but there is a form to formally request a pre-release amount if you have kind of project expenses before the ethics part of your project starts. So if you need to do that, let me know. I can direct you to the form. That form is also surprisingly not that painful. Yeah, but just know that this has implications for any student trainees, because they'll select that. They tend to select it on all their stipends because they're like, my research needs ethics. And I'm like, no, but you don't need ethics to be paid. Anyways, it gets complicated when there's stipends and research allowances mixed. So come talk to me if you're not sure.
If you have an early release before the ethics, they will expire, so make sure you update your ethics or get it done.
Yeah.
I've had PIs who've had them expired, and I can't pay their staff because it's expired.
Yeah. So, I mean, UBC takes very seriously their mandate to manage research funds that require ethics approvals. And so that's why they'll freeze counts that have expired things. So again, one of the wonderful things about the School of Nursing is we almost never have to use these two boxes. We just get the director's signature, which I will get for you. In the case of internal UBC School of Nursing funding, Ellen will complete this bottom section often, or Elizabeth. But it saves us a couple of steps, so that really is helpful for speeding along the process. I don't think this is actually a faculty of medicine. They have to go department head, then the dean, then ORS, and then they can submit to the agency. So it really is streamlined for us. But I did want to just highlight this is that gray area between pre-award and post-award, where you might have to provide letters to ORS, you might need to sign award acceptance forms and submit them back to the funder, whether your ethics is approval has come through yet. All these pieces need to be done before the funding gets released, right? So just a reminder of that. And this last slide, I mean, I'm not going to go over this. Everybody has some experience preparing grant applications, but just to say, like, on average, kind of a 2-month timeline before the funder deadline is kind of what you should be thinking about. And having more time usually means higher quality applications, so give yourself lots of time. So I think I talked quite a bit longer than I expected, but the QR code is for the survey for today's session.